Okay, I mean, all things considered, it went very well.
Well, welcome to our multiple Zoom and Share. I think it's our fourth or fifth, everybody. Today it's going to be Chris Knapp. I will be muting you as we go through the process so that, or actually there's only so many people, you can stay unmuted and we can just talk to her as she's going through. Chris is a Rose Award scholar for the instructor for the SKB. She does a lot of stuff with the students also. So it's kind of cool to have Chris doing this again. She's our lead sculptor and she also paints. She hasn't painted much lately, but I think she's trying to dabble back into it again. But anyhow, Chris has been coming, what, 10, 15 years now?
I only missed 2 sessions,
Okay.
and it was just because I injured my back.
So
and
Chris is,
since then, I've learned to pay more attention to physical fitness and core strength, et cetera, which is very important if you're doing sculpture. I learned the hard way. Well, anyway, so
Chris, go ahead and enjoy, everybody.
okay, welcome everybody. I appreciate you attending. I'm going to start off with a brief overview on what I do, and I'll show you a few of my. I'm supposed to concentrate on my big pieces, so I'm going to show you just 8 of my big pieces. I have more than that, but 8 of the ones that I can show you a little bit more of the process. And then I'm going to do a little demo for you, because with every big piece, you have to start off with a small piece so that you work out the details. And well, there's many reasons, and I'll go through that later. But the big thing about monumental sculpture is, and well, there are a few guys here, but it's a male-dominated field. There's no question about it. More and more women have entered the field. There is a little bit of discrimination still with that, where some clients think that a woman can't do big things. She's not strong enough, or she doesn't have the knowledge to work with the tools, etc. And I'm here to tell you that that's not an issue. Yes, you have to be reasonably fit. And I've worked on that. I do weights once a week, and it's just mild weights. And I do core strength exercises. I'm comfortable on a ladder no more than 5 feet. I haven't had to work on scaffolding yet. For the right monument, I probably would do that. You don't have to have a huge studio to do monumental work. You can just rent one and just build that into your production costs. So I'm trying to knock down all the barriers that you think might exist for doing monumental stuff. And oh yes, there's the money that's involved. No problem. You bill your client, okay? And then you build in a little extra for you. And so it's all very doable. It's not scary, and it's a ton of fun, because when you do something big, especially in 3D, I mean, we all do art for a couple of reasons. One, we enjoy doing it. It makes us feel whole. I don't know about you, but I feel like I have no choice. I have to do art or else I'm not happy. But the other thing is that you do art because you want to share it with other people. Maybe you have a message. Maybe you want them to feel good about something, or maybe you want to educate them about your subject matter. And so when you do a big monumental sculpture, you really hit home with that. Paintings are powerful too, even the small ones. But I'm just telling you, I noticed a big difference, because I like Anthony says, I don't paint too much anymore, but I still do somewhat. I like working with the colors. There's something about sculptures that's just more visceral, and you can touch it and just relate to it more. So let me see. I'm going to give you an overview of my studio after I'm going to show you a few slides of the process. So Anthony, if you can get started on the first slide, and then we'll go to a studio overview and a demo.
Hold on, please.
No problem.
Let's see if I can do this properly. Look at that.
Okay, so remember I said how this is a male-dominated field, there were some women who really inspired me in the very beginning. And I didn't intend to do this. I intended to be a painter. And I don't know if any of you heard this story. There was a painter sculptor in SKB whose name was Carol Grande, and whose sister Janine still is, well, she's a Rose Award winner, and she attends every year. It was Carol that got me started, but I spent a week in her Montana home, and then I just sort of fell in love with the whole idea of sculpture, and started studying other women sculptors to see what they did. And these pieces you see before you are by Malvina Hoffman. Now, she lived to the ripe old age of 81, which isn't ripe and old these days, but she died in 1966. So that was still a good long life and a very productive life for her. She was born into a fairly wealthy family that was in her favor. Her father was a pianist, and her mother was involved with the arts just in a casual way, and they very much encouraged her to do her art. And these two pieces are part of what she's famous for. It was put in the Chicago Field Museum in the early 1930s. It's called the Hall of Man. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not, but it's a huge body of work that depicts all the basic stereotypes, different racial stereotypes throughout the world. So there's that. And then Anthony, next slide, please. This is her self-portrait. Now, the first two bronzes were, well, they were bronze, and that's what she usually worked in, but she also is a stone sculptor. And if you want to talk about having strength, boy, you really need it for that. I did try that, and I just didn't want to mess with the stone dust, which is really toxic to breathe in, and all the physical labor that was involved. Clay is a lot more friendly. But I thought it was pretty impressive that she did both. And she was a big influence on me. I bought every one of her books. She did several autobiographies, traveled all over the world to get her reference material. Next slide, please.
Why is it not?
Now, this is one of my mentors. Her name is Vera Goodnight. You may have heard of her. She grew up close to where I'm living right now. She actually won a scholarship to attend the University of Colorado back in the late 60s, and declined it because she didn't want to study abstract art. Who of us can relate to that? I mean, that was a big deal back then, and that's all they were teaching. And she's not the only one that just sort of dropped out of the art scene because of that. So what she did instead is she studied with several private mentors and in this northern Colorado area, and worked as a secretary, and developed this piece. This is the one that she's most famous for. It's called, what is it called? The Day the Wall Came Down. And she's known for her horses. They're one of her big passions in life. And George Bush also has one of these castings as well. But this one is in Berlin, and it was put up to, of course, commemorate the collapsing and the taking down of the Berlin Wall. And so I got a lot of my horse knowledge from her, and well, from my own studies. I'm a horse nut myself. And so she paints as well. She's painting more now these days than sculpting. I say we're right around the same mature age, not old, but mature. Anyway, she was a big influence on me. So next slide, and I'm going to start showing you 8 of my monuments and kind of how I arrived at that. So this was my first big piece. It's called, whoops, not that one. Yes, we're getting there. Okay, it's called My Little Deer, and I was approached by this lady in Kettering, Ohio, where I lived at the time, to make a piece for her. She saw a couple of my small bronzes, And she asked me to put this, make this for her so she could put it in her yard because she wanted to open a bed and breakfast. And so the one on the top is the maquette, and it's only about, I'd say about 6 inches tall, not including the base. And what I did is I showed her a few drawings of things I had in mind. She wanted something to show tenderness, and she wanted this subject matter. And so I gave her several different options. And the big one that you see there at the bottom is what we came up with. And so you can see there's a little bit of a difference between the two, but not much. And so I like to get the clients involved in a lot of the steps. That way they have ownership. There are no surprises at the end where they can say, oh my God, this is not what I expected. It's very, very important that when you do monumental work, that you realize that you're building relationships, and you will not only have them for this particular piece, but you may have them for several others, or maybe their friends will want something too. It's just amazing. It's almost magical how it builds. So, and this piece led me to another client that I met at the Sculpture Invitational in Loveland. I started doing that show I did that for 15 years while I was still living in Ohio and working as a nurse. And so a client from Hawaii saw this, said, oh, I want this for my park in Hawaii. Little did I know how big this park is. It's the largest outdoor sculpture park in the United States. And so it's called Na'ina Kai. And I had the great pleasure of visiting that just before the pandemic broke out. And so it was just a real treat to see it in its setting there. So, but because of that piece, she also commissioned me to do 2 more. Next slide, please.
Hold on.
So this one is called Waiting for Lunch, a small piece, maybe about 8 inches tall, not including the base. And this client in Hawaii saw this and said, hey, could you do this for me for an exhibit I have? She built Mount Denali from Alaska in this park that she owned in Hawaii. This lady is the ex-wife, now widow, of Charles Schultz, who did the Peanuts cartoons. She has money to burn, but she wanted to do something that would really provide a good tourist outlet for the island of Kauai. And so she said, do this, but take the lily pads away and show all of his legs. So next slide, please. So there it is. That's the Mount Denali that she built in the background. It was a big, it's hollow in the middle. It's made out of some sort of fiberglass material. And they just wanted to have, it's kind of comical to me, Mount Denali in Hawaii. But that's a life-size moose, the kind that you would see in Alaska. And it all started with that little piece, and with meeting her in person in a show in Loveland, Colorado. So next slide, please. Notice I call these slides, they're not slides at all, are they? Anyway.
Well, we noticed, actually.
I mean, I'm showing my age. But anyway, this is the third piece that she put in the same park, Na'ina Kai in Kauai. She wanted a caribou to go along with the mix. And luckily, I had been to Alaska a couple of years before I was asked to do this, had lots of reference material. And as a sculptor, you need not only still pictures, but videos are really, really helpful. So you can see how they move, so you can get the different angles and stuff like that. It's not necessary, but it's really nice. So caribou, you learn a lot about a subject when you paint it as well as when you sculpt it. I found out they had really big feet, and their antlers were immense. And they're majestic. This is, a bull. And so I just thought there was one that walked across the road in front of our car in Alaska and looked just like that. And that's the vision I had anticipated to show her. I just showed her a drawing and she said, yep, that's it. Let's do it. So I did make a maquette of this. I didn't show you the maquette. I couldn't pull that up in time to prepare for this, but the maquette's the same thing. The maquette's about, I think 11 inches tall. I made that a little bigger. The thing is, when you do a small maquette for monumental work, you can't enlarge it more than 5 times. If you do more than 5 times, then all kinds of distortions occur and your work is twice as hard. So that's why I had to make the maquette a little bigger for this one. Next slide, please. Okay, there it is in the Mount Denali that they built for it. And when you do big work, sometimes the clients ask you for input on the surroundings, the landscaping, the bases and stuff like that. In this case, this lady knows exactly what she wants. She's put in many bronzes before in this park. And so she actually designed this park. So I thought she did a really good job. Next slide, please. And then that's the overview of the moose, and then the caribou is way off in the distance. Somebody else's bears in there. They did a little frontier kind of village to give a more of an Alaskan feel. So.
And the palm trees really make it Alaska.
I know you're not supposed. But I mean, that's why it's kind of comical to me. But they use this park for weddings and all kinds of events. And it's also a hardwood plantation. So it's self-supporting between the people that come and visit it for the sculptures and the people that visit it for the events. It's become quite a big deal. It's probably the biggest draw on the island of Kauai. Next slide, please. Okay, this one's called Little Flirt. And I made this for a gentleman that I met at the Sculpture in the Park show in Melbourne. I find that meeting people face to face gives you one of the greatest chances possible for doing commission pieces and especially monumental works. And so going back to that first slide, I show you the first big piece that I did called My Little Deer with the little fawn and the doe. He purchased that for his daughter for her second home. They both lived kind of close to each other up in Aspen, Colorado. And he purchased that bronze for her. And we got to talking and he called me up about 8 months later and he said, would you like to do another piece for me? And he wanted to be a bear in this pose. He was very specific about that. And so, of course, I wanted to do that. And so I later on, this is kind of a comical side story. I found out that in the Middle East, when someone pulls their foot up and shows you the bottom of their foot, it's like a big fat insult. It's like, look at the dirt on my feet. And I was told that by a guy in another show, but nevertheless, only the people in the Middle East know about that. Most people here think it's kind of cute. So that's the maquette. It's about 10 inches tall. Next slide, please. Anthony. There we go. Now this is a little out of order, but I'll get back to the Little Flirt. This is a piece called High Five. Now that's life-size black bear. He stands 5'9". That's one of our indigenous foxes. I just happened to catch him at the right moment. He was very afraid of that bear. That bronze has been pretty successful. It got Best of Show in Sioux Falls, South Dakota 2 years ago. And the city of Gillette just bought it. I just photographed it there no more than 3 days ago when we were going through there. So it's been doing pretty well. And all of my bronze monuments are limited edition. So once you invest all that time and money into making it and to having the mold, you can reuse that mold again and cast some more. And that's when the money really starts paying off. So next slide, please. All right, so there's Big Flirt in the big size. Let me see. That one is about 5 foot tall. The client had his own idea. This is in Aspen. He had his own idea for the basing. This is in the front entryway of his home. So again, I thought he did a great job. I always try to go there when they're installing a big piece, just because the clients like that. They want me to see how it's being displayed. They want me to give some input, but ultimately they have their own ideas. And unless they're doing something that's absolutely horrible, I'm going to say, hey, you did a good job. And but he did anyway. This fellow is from Germany. He has a very interesting sense of humor. He calls it Fat Albert. And I don't care. He can call it whatever he wants. It makes him happy. And he purchased more of my art as a result of this one. So next slide, please. All right, so there's Little Flirt. That's the maquette, and the clay of the high five. I designed them to go together, and the reason I did that is because I had another client that lives close to Estes Park who wanted to have both of those at the front entrance of his park. It's called Allen's Park. He lives at a very historical home. The guy who founded Estes Park, he used to own the home where this guy lives, and so he wanted those two together. So I had to scale them exactly. And so that's why I'm showing you that together, so you can see that. And so when you scale those things exactly, one of the most useful things to do is make sure that their head is the same size. And once you got the head measurements, everything else on the body is kind of scaled to the head. And so it just follows along like pieces in a puzzle. Next slide, please. All right, so there's the big high five. That's in our front yard. And next slide, please. Okay, that piece is called Fond Memories, Mule Deer. 3 separate pieces. I did that so again I can get the clients to have some say, some ownership in the piece. The clients decide how they want to arrange those. And I've sold several of these now. One's in, this one's in Aspen, and this was purchased by the same gentleman who commissioned me to do the Big Flirt piece. There's another one that was just purchased for a home in Mankato, Minnesota. Gillette, Wyoming has one, and then a client in Loveland has one. So generally speaking, I make my monument edition sizes between 9 and 12 castings. That's enough. And it more than pays for itself. Next slide.
Move my mouse, it doesn't go to the next slide.
Oh, okay. All right, so this is a maquette of my biggest piece to date. It stands about 9 feet tall in its life-size display. The maquette's been doing pretty well too. It's called Protecting the Future. And for this piece, it was my first piece where I had to work with a committee. And I've heard lots of horror stories about stuff like that. There's a lot of artists who don't like doing commissions because they feel like they have to do what the client wants. And personally, I find the interplay between the client and myself and the combined team effort to be very satisfying. And it can be that way. They don't really dictate what you do. They're looking to you for guidance. And for me, when I know that I'm doing something that just really makes their day, their year, whatever, I just love it. It's fantastic. So anyway, there's that one. Next slide, please. So there it is in the big form. As you can see, it's in a traffic roundabout. Again, I made these 3 separate pieces so that the purchasing committee could decide exactly how they wanted to do it. They did ask me for my thoughts on the base. It's elevated about 2.5 feet from the ground because they were afraid that trucks might roll over the intersection and crash into the bronzes, so they had to have it elevated somewhat. But it's stone along that perimeter, and they're working on the landscaping. This particular piece was meant to commemorate the elk herd that lives in the field behind this. The local residents were very, very, thankful to have the elk herd there, and they wanted to commemorate it. And it's the only bronze that we know of that commemorates the cow elk instead of the bull elk. Everybody wants to see the bull with the antlers. These people wanted this. And so that's why we called it Protecting the Future. And they do cool things like put Christmas wreaths on the necks, Halloween things on it. I mean, and I even had them call me up and they said, do you mind that we do that? And I said, why would I mind? I think it's great. So anyway, next slide. Oh, that's another view of it with the elk herd in the background. That was a rainy day. All total, all 3 of those pieces combined is only 850 pounds of weight. Now you may say only 850 pounds. Well, some people don't realize that bronze is hollow in the middle and it has steel armature on the inside, these big pieces. And so that's not a necessity. Otherwise, it would be too costly. And bronze is fairly strong. These days we use silicone bronze. And so it's strong enough to be hollow. It's actually about 1/2 inch thick. So it does very well. And the hooves, or the base of the bronze, is screwed into the stone base with threaded rods that go up into a bolt in the bottom of the hooves in this case. And then we use epoxy to cement it in place. Next slide, please. So this is my latest big piece. It's a result of that small little toad you see to the right, which is only about 4 inches high. I decided I get bored doing the same thing over and over again. And so I decided to do a whimsical line of things where I don't know how this happened. It started off with the jackrabbit, and I just made it so it was all curled up in a ball and its ears were kind of draped over itself. And the next one Bill came up with, he had a client ask him, well, what's her next one going to be? And I was sick. It was during an art show in Tulsa, and I had a terrible sore throat. And so he was manning the booth for me. And he just said, well, the next one's going to be a toad. And then he later on told me about it. I only had a week to put it together to show to the client and then rush it to the foundry. But it did so well that the foundry kept telling me, you got to make that one big. And so I finally did it. There it is in clay. And next slide, please. It stands about 36 inches tall. This is us about 2 weeks ago, taking it out of the foundry. I think it's probably about 175 pounds in weight. I decided to elevate it a little bit on that pedestal so that if someone wants to put it in a garden setting, you'll have the flowers or the bushes or whatever underneath it. And you get pretty familiar with guys handling your pieces with skid steers like this. It helps to have a strong and understanding husband who also is willing to ratchet things down in the back of a truck and transport it places. We both have had our back issues, but I think we've got those handled now because we just didn't do things in a smart way. Now we're being much more intelligent about that. What is that they say about as you grow older, you get smarter? Well, so anyway, and if you don't have access to someone like a strong husband or somebody else, we have these local contractors who will hire their guys out to just help you to load things. And that works quite nicely too. And it doesn't cost much at all. Usually they're so happy to help you, they don't even want to get paid, you know. So I just, you know, give them like $20 for 15 minutes of work. They're happy, I'm happy, and they're entertained. Next slide. So this toad was just installed in Sioux Falls this past Saturday. And we've been on the road a lot since then. Sioux Falls has a sculpture walk that pulls in a lot of sculptors from all over the United States. And they have totally revitalized their downtown by the use of outdoor sculpture. The people, this downtown was dead like a lot of inner cities get to be at over time. And this brought in restaurants, it brought in people who want to come and see these things. They're promoting these things more and more. This year marks their 15th year. And so they put your sculpture up on a nice pedestal like this. They give you a stipend. This year it was, what was it, $1,500 just for letting it be in their city for a year. And then after the year expires, then they'll move it to another city, which will also give you a stipend. And so the bronze starts paying for itself. And oh, by the way, they work on selling them. And so I've had 3 of my pieces sold through this program. So it really builds on itself. Next slide, please. Oh, that's just, I didn't even know I had that one there. That's just a close up so you can see the toad better. People like feeling the warts. I love to see the kids like look at it and laugh. That's where you get your payoffs. When you see, look at things, when you see people look at things, touch them, laugh at them, it's just worth it. Next slide. Okay, so how does all this happen? Well, it's not too much different from painting, actually. It's just that you approach things from many different views. Many of you probably heard me say this before. You're just drawing the same thing over and over again from different views, and you're putting it together like pieces of a puzzle. If any of you like to do jigsaw puzzles, you'll love to do sculpture because it's different pieces of the puzzle and making them put together. This armature that you see on this piece here is a pretty standard armature. That horizontal rod, you can move it up and down. I attach my armature to the external armature with rubber bands. That's what you're seeing there. And you'll see me demonstrate a little bit more on that a little bit later. But the thing I wanted to say, you know, the things that are similar about painting is you still need to have a strong abstract background or foundation. And this piece pretty much illustrates that. I wanted to have that shape. And I was trying to think of an animal where I could get that shape. And I have never done an otter before, but if you do your research, you can find out enough about otters just by researching them on the web, going through your own photos if you have them. I had a few, not many. Most of it was web searches. And just finding out about their behavior. I knew that they ate this particular kind of fish and just decided go with it. And so this is still in clay, obviously. I haven't gotten a price yet from the foundry, but I do have a client that I had in mind for this piece who bought one of my, I did a custom made piece for his company. It's called Otterbox. And they're in Fort Collins and they make those cases for phones. And so I thought, well, once I get my production costs from the foundry, then usually I multiply that price 2.5 to 3 times above my production costs and give that to the client and say, would you be interested? And I look and see what will the market bear, what are similar size bronzes going for, and I keep that in mind too. So that's kind of how that whole process happens. Also with sculpture, you still use mirrors. I know a lot of you use paintings or use mirrors for your paintings where you get another point of view. I know it's important to stand back, and that's one of the big things I see students forget to do is they forget to stand back from their work. But with sculpture, you not only have to stand back, you want to look at the piece from the top, from all sides, and even a little bit from the bottom. And so it keeps you moving. You don't want to just sit and sculpt. It's better to stand and keep moving. If you do something on one side, you do something on another. Again, a lot like painting, it's just that you don't worry about the colors so much, not at this stage. Okay, so, all right, so again, this is a small maquette of a larger piece that I did for a client in Utah. And with this one, I usually start off with a drawing, but with this one, I just did it from clay and I studied videos. And next slide, please. This is the beginning of the large version of that piece you just saw. That's my dog Boo. And you'll see that there's some building foam that you can get at Home Depot. When you're making a large piece, you want to fill the interior of the piece not with clay because it gets to be too pricey and too heavy to work with, but you fill it with foam or foil. So you see calipers in the front part. You use calipers a lot. You can enlarge a piece two ways. You can enlarge it digitally, or you can enlarge it yourself. Now you'll see that there's a grid work in the bottom of that base there. I took that same grid work and put it on the small maquette, the small study of this piece. And so it's the same process that all the old sculptors like Michelangelo used, where they form a grid and they just enlarge the squares on the grid, and you use the calipers to measure. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's so simple. It really is so simple. And you save yourself the enlarging costs. And I thought that this piece didn't have a very complicated internal armature. And so that's why I elected to do it myself. Next slide, please. All right, there's the finished clay of it. Next slide, please. And there it is in bronze. This bronze also is doing pretty well. It won People's Choice in Castlegar, British Columbia. And that's part of the circuit that gets started in the Sioux Falls sculpture work. And next slide, please. All right, these are the clients that I did it for. And I can't stress this enough. Get them involved in different processes as you go along. I invited them to come to the foundry and see the patinas being put on and allow them to make the choices for the colors or the patinas. Oh my God, you would have thought that I told them, well, let's go to Disneyland together. And so they had a lot of fun. I think it was like maybe a 7-hour drive from their home, which they gladly did. And they just stayed in the patina room the whole time, as did I. It took hours to do these patinas. And this is the one that they put in their yard. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting back to the process a little bit. All bronzes, once you make the small clay model, all the monuments, everything, you have to start with a mold. Now, this is a very small piece for a monument. I'll show you on the next slide. But when you do the big monuments, the mold size usually can't exceed 2 feet by 2 feet. And so if you have a big piece, then you're going to have lots of different mold parts that the foundry will weld together. And don't worry about it. They know what they're doing. They make these internal stainless steel armatures on the inside so that you don't have to worry about the engineering of that. You as the artist, all you have to do is just be the designer, the creator. You get to have the fun part. Next slide. Okay, and there's what that piece looked like when it was done. you know, and enlarge. This client wanted me to make this for her husband who had recently passed away. He was a big Cubs fan. She had a title in mind. It's called #1 Cubs Fan. It was my idea to put the little bear in there. But the main reason I'm showing you this is I used real objects for this, and you can do that. So I used an actual baseball cap and I covered it with a liquid wax and I embedded it in the clay sculpture. The little insignia that you see on his shirt is an actual little embroidered patch that for the Chicago Cubs. It's a real baseball that I put in there, a real catcher's mitt that I put in there. Everything else I fashioned myself, but it saves you a lot of time and it adds to the authenticity of the piece if you can do something like that. I don't make it exact, like I'll put some, like I paint wax on there, liquid wax, and I'll leave some of the irregularities of the wax coating there to give it a more artistic feel. Next. All right, so this is going to be start to finish of one of my more recent bronzes. I finished this on the last SKB last September. The clients that you saw with the cougar piece, where they were involved with the patina, they wanted me to then do this piece for them. The wife had an idea where she wanted to show a cougar chasing 2 white-tailed deer. There are whitetail in Utah where they live. And so I thought, okay, let's see what I can do. You see my measurements there. I had to measure out the approximate lengths of each one. And everything, it's very static looking right now. I'm showing a bit of the armature and the mountain lion and how many head lengths there are there. That's just a very easy way of keeping things in proportion. And this is what I showed to the clients. Once they okayed this, then I made a maquette, next step. But I wanted to show you this because whenever you do, even small or big, you have to be familiar with the musculature underneath. And so I always get these kinds of references to go from, so that even though this mountain lion isn't in the same pose as the one in my piece, you still get an idea of how the muscles are going to flow. Next, please. Okay, here's the start of it. You see I have some references in the background. You start off with very basic shapes. You can see some of the armature in there. Next slide. And there's the finished maquette. 3 different pieces. They can put it where they want. This couple also bought the maquette. Next slide, please. And this is it's a digital enlarger. It's the latest state-of-the-art machine. And what they do is they take your maquette, they scan it, and they run it through this machine. And this machine will make slices that are digitally enlarged of your small piece only to the size that you want. And this is in Lander, Wyoming, in a foundry called Eagle Bronze. And at this point, I do 99% of my work with them because they're that wonderful to work with. Next slide. This is just a close-up of the mountain lion. A little bit tricky in that you have to make sure that he still gives you the feeling of jumping through the air, but the branches on the tree holds him so that everything's stable. Next slide. And here it is in the enlarged version in foam, and that's what they do. When they put it through that machine I showed you, you'll see those slices, and they just glue them together. They develop an internal armature that's strong. And that's tough to do. I mean, if I had to design that armature myself, I don't have an engineering background. You rely on the foundry for that. That's their job. And they put it on a wooden base with wheels so that I could turn it around and work on it. I'll show you some tools that I use to refine the foam. It's not as simple as getting the foam from the foundry and then slapping some clay on it. You have to put clay on it or else the mold will stick to it. You have to refine the clay using a number of different tools that I'll show you. Next slide. And here's the other two, the same thing, working on it there in the studio. These are nearly done, clay all over everything. And next slide. There's my strong husband again. It does help to have a trailer. You don't have to have one. You can always rent one. But when you see that we've cut off certain parts, and that's because we live on bumpy mountain roads. The foundry did make it so that the antlers were detachable. And so those are going to be molded separately anyway, because remember I told you that you can't have a mold piece more than 2 feet by 2 feet. And so your piece ends up being cut into several different pieces. A lot of artists don't like to see that. I don't care because I know that the foundry will put it back together, no problem. Next slide. There it is at the foundry. Patinas are being applied. They use several different kinds of chemicals for that process. Liver of sulfa, cupric, ferric, nitrate, I believe. And just to get the different colors. In some cases, they'll use a little bit of acrylic paint that's been thinned down, but they have to put a blowtorch on it first in order to open the pores of the bronze. And then that way, whatever chemical or paint they put on it is absorbed into the bronze and becomes more permanent. And that's the client in the background again. She wanted to be involved with this one as well. And so she's supervising. Next slide. There's the other one, big. You'll see those little attachments on the bottom. That's so that those things can be anchored into some sort of a stone base later. Next slide. And there's the big mountain lion. The armature in that one, I did consult with the foundry about how to make how long to make the base so that it could support itself once it's attached. Next slide. Next, there we go. And there it is installed in their yard. Next slide. And there it is again. And you'll see that other little piece in the upper left-hand corner, the original piece that they commissioned me to do. And you see how things blossom. I mean, you just never know. So they did their own landscaping, their own installation. They're both engineers, so they were comfortable with that. Next slide. Okay, so just a few tidbits, and then we're going to go on to this demo. This is that same My Little Deer piece, and the client had a specific idea. This is in Kettering, Ohio, about how she wanted this displayed. And I thought she did a great job. You know, she put a little waterfall there with some nice landscaping behind it. And this is part of her bed and breakfast. And she'll send me pictures over the years about how it looks and the landscaping, how it's changed. It's just phenomenal. She actually promotes me by doing that. And she'll mention my name and she'll say, here's a wonderful sculpture by Christine Knapp. I mean, as long as you keep your clients as friends and you stay in contact with them and you just keep building those relationships, it's amazing how things blossom. Next slide. Same sculpture, different location. This was in downtown Lyons, Colorado. It was there for a couple of years, and they give you a stipend for that. And there's my strong husband again, along with one of the people from the foundry helping install it. They just drill holes into that rock, and then with threaded rods attached to the hooves, they just put it in place with silicone glue. That way it's not a permanent installation, but it's strong enough to keep someone from trying to lift it off of the rock. Next slide. A few other tidbits. You don't have to make perfect lettering yourself. how boring that would be. And you could never get it really uniform and professional looking. So this is a piece I did for the school of nursing that I graduated from 150 years ago. And this was a 2 feet by 2 feet blow up of their school pin. That's a big deal to nurses. Everyone has their own unique school pin. And so what I did is I gave a template to a local laser engraver and told them to make the lettering and that I would fill in the rest with clay. And I just wanted you to see how that happens. Next slide. Here's another one. This was through a laser engraver here in Loveland, Colorado. They just cut the letters out of wood and I laid them into my clay. I just told them the size that I needed. I laid them into my clay. It looks nice and professional. And if you look closely, you'll see that I have little metal beads in the elephant's whatever's on his back. And this was to go into a historic home in Cherry Creek to commemorate a man whose last name was Tamman, who brought the circus to town in the early 1900s. And so this historic home, this is where he used to live. So next slide. And that's what it looks like finished. So you can see, I mean, wow, you can come up with all kinds of shortcuts to make your job easier. Next slide. So these are some of the tools that I use for smaller pieces and for, and that's the clay that I would use for a smaller piece. I use that particular brand just because I like the way it feels. And I use high melt, meaning that it has more wax in it and it's harder and you can get more details. Armature wire, you can get it all different sizes and thicknesses. And those are some of my favorite tools right there. 2 different sizes of calipers. You don't need a whole lot of tools, but you can. I mean, it's like paintbrushes, you know, you end up buying more than you need. Next slide. Whenever you have a bronze that's outdoors, it's a good idea once a year. You don't have to, like in Europe, you have bronzes that are hundreds of years old and they don't put a wax coating on them. But this, if you don't want the patina to change, which it will do, it'll take on elements of what's ever in the atmosphere. If it's close to the sea, it'll turn like a greenish yellow color. Other places will make it turn a black color. Some people want that look, and that's the way a lot of those old historical bronzes are in Europe. But I tell people around here, if they want to keep the patina exactly like they saw it from the day one, to put some of this on a warm summer day after they've rinsed it off with a little bit of soap and water and let it dry. And then you put this on and you buff it and you're good to go. Next slide. All right, so I'm getting ready to do this video, but I know some of you have already been to SKB. If you have questions, I learned from mentors. I'm not officially college trained, although I've had tons of workshops. Feel free to contact me. And also, if you go to that website right there and you press on the tab that says how to sculpt, Anthony's been nice enough to put on several teaching videos that I used for some of the scholarship students in Texas. And it just takes you through step by step. Well, it doesn't show you, well, it actually shows you the bronze process too. So yeah, go ahead and take a look at that if you're interested in learning more. So now we're ready to move on. All right. So everybody still awake? Here we are. So I'm going to show you just a little bit of what I use for the bigger pieces here in my studio. This is my workbench. And like I said, you got to be comfortable with some equipment. It's nothing really heavy duty. So an electric drill is nice. A skillet where you can melt your clay. There's it's called classic clay, and I use that for the monumental pieces. I put it in the skillet and I heat it until it's the consistency of thin oatmeal, and then I brush it over the foam structures, and it just puts on the first layer of clay, and then I can refine it from there. When you see those big foam pieces that I was showing you, these are curry combs that you would use on a horse, but they're great. They're really great for digging into the foam and refining it. So absolutely an essential. Bigger pieces or bigger tools for working on the clay. They have serrated edges to them. And here's another one that you can get at Sculpture Depot, where you can actually take this part out and use this handle. Yes, I know I have clay all over everything, but I don't care. It still works the same. Anyway, this is interchangeable. You can put different sized loops and things in there. This is great for cutting clay. And this I use occasionally, just a little propane torch. If I'm wanting to make certain areas of the clay softer, I can just kind of, just graze over it and it makes it really soft. The warmer your clay is, the softer it's going to be. The other things that I use for filling the inside of pieces, aluminum foil. Again, some of the foam that I use, you just cut it up and you take a glue gun and you glue it into place. And this book, if you do animals, is a must, because on the inside you have several different species with their muscles, their skeletons, everything that you need to help you understand what's going on beneath the surface. And again, I didn't study zoology, I studied nursing. So I didn't know anything about this, but you learn, Over here, behind my bench is lots of reference books. I'm sure all of you guys do this for your paintings. And then, this is a little enticement. For those of you who are coming to SKB, this is something I thought I'd try. I've never done it before. I wanted to show horses emerging from something. And I take a hike up in the mountains every day, and I came across this piece of wood. And maybe I can show you the back side. It's just a piece of wood, very rough and rugged looking. I used a glue gun here at the bottom to attach it to a base so that I would have something to work from. And I then sealed the wood with just a clear varnish, because my intention is to have the mold go right over this. And so if you have really deep crevices, the mold rubber will sink in there. So you have to fill in all the deep crevices. And so the idea is to have this horse be in relief. In other words, pretty much 2D. And then these horses gradually out a little bit more. This one will be 3D. And there's another one that I'm going to demo for you. Let's see. That will be right here, and it'll be 3D. So these two will be 3D, this will be half 3D, and this will be relief. I may add another one into here at the end, not sure yet. Sometimes pieces like paintings just evolve as they go. And so again, I've never tried a piece like this, but I'm going to demo this at SKB. And I'll have some of it started, and the rest you'll see it develop. So if you guys would like to see that in person or in Zoom, I encourage you to do so. Now, behind this right here, I'm going to take this black down now, is all of my reference material, not all of it, but some of it, for this particular, here we go, for this particular piece. I try to have everything that I do printed out so that it's the same size as a sculpture I'm going to make. So that way, excuse me just a minute here, I can take a caliper and say, well, if the horse's head is that big there, then it's going to have to be that big here. And you go through the whole body that way. And again, it's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. I even went so far as to show exactly where the armature pipe is going to be and where the armature wires are going to be. So when you're a sculptor, you're an artist who happens to be a builder too. And it's really gratifying. And John Phelps, many of you know him. He sculpts and paints too. He says that, to all of your credit, he says that painting is more cerebral than sculpting. And I kind of agree with that, because I can sculpt and I can listen to things in the background, and I can be almost on automatic, and things still keep coming together. If I paint or do scratchboard or anything 2D, I have to be more involved mentally. Maybe it's just me, but John Phelps says that too. So I know it's not just me. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this away. I'm going to take this part away now and show you a quick demo. On one of the horses, it's going to be 3D. And I don't know what time it's 12:30, so we got a little bit of time yet. Here's this right here. Let's see. Okay. And it's always good to start with the side view first. And you can see up here, here's my reference.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, so like I know that if I take these calipers here, the belly of this horse has to be about that thick. That's going to help a lot. And because I know where this armature here is on the inside, I can measure from here to here and know that, oh yeah, from there to there, that's how far down the clay needs to go. Because sometimes in the beginning, your eyes may fool you. Now, I have some people who tell me, oh, they just do this by sight. But I think personally, it's much better to use these calipers, even if you're experienced, because it's a good way to double check. It's a good way to keep everything in line. And then that way you don't waste your time spending hours on something and then you check it later and you go, oh my God, that's where I went wrong. So that's another thing that I see students do in the very beginning. They don't use the calipers, they don't take the measurements, and they don't keep turning it from side to side to check all the different angles. Now, I don't have all the angles up here that I would normally encourage a student to have. Like normally I would have a chest view, a view of the body from above, but I know horses really well, and so I don't necessarily need that, but I'm just telling you, anything that you do, you need to have all those views, okay? So I'm going to show you over here on the other side of my studio. You see that over there, there's is a window and 2 lamps. Those are the same kind of lamps that you see on food buffets, and they cast out a lot of heat and they warm up the clay. And that's what I'm using it for. I'm using it to warm up clay. You can also use a microwave, but microwaves are a bit, I'll use it at SKB. they can be a bit temperamental in that the inside of the clay sometimes gets a little too warm and you could burn yourself. You can also use a little space heater and just put your clay in a box and direct it into the box. Some people use a refrigerator with a light bulb in it, but this is my preferred method. So I'm going to go get this clay. Hang on. And it's been warming up for a while now, so it's good and soft. It might be a little too soft, but that's okay. So, again, what I've done is I've made my clay into thin little ropes like this, about the size of my middle finger. You don't have to do that, but if you're doing a demo, it makes things go a lot easier. I've also wanted to show you that I'm going to put some foil on the inside of this, because there's some empty space in there that you don't need to have the solid clay.
And you're out of foil.
And I just, oh my God. And I live 35 minutes from the nearest store. No, I have more foil over there. Anyway, what I do is I take the foil and I just roll it up into a rope like this. And you want to make it fairly compact. And then I roll it up into a rough shape of the way I want it to be. And in this case, I want it to fill this area right here. Now I can use some, and I will do that, I can use some electrical tape. To hold it in place. Usually,
and why not any other type of tape, like masking tape?
That's a very good question. It's because it just sticks better to the things like, and it stays put better. Now on this armature, now I do have some electrical tape here. And in order to hold this armature in place, I drilled some screws into there. This is just plumbing pipe. You get it at Home Depot. This thing here is called a floor flange. They come in different sizes, and you just anchor it into a board with, in this case, just 2 screws. And then I made the armature like what you see up here with the armature wire. I bend the wire with a pair of needle nose pliers to the shapes that I want in the exact sizes that I want. And you'll notice that I have everything, every one of the bend marks is as crisp and clean as I can get. That's another mistake I see students make, where they'll just bend it and it's round, and then they lose where the shape is. They lose where the joints are. These, like you see down here, the skeleton on this horse closely follows, I know this is in reverse, but it closely follows the skeletal structure. See, I mean, here's the clavicle. That's, yeah, this is a shoulder blade. That's the clavicle. This is the humerus. My medical background's kicking in. And then up here's the pelvis. This is the horse's knee, but they all bend at certain points. And students will bend things in the middle. And I just say, you can't break their bones. That's an important lesson. You can't break bones in sculpture. Okay. So anyhow, getting back to this, you will see that even though this is 2D here, I have, and it's really hard to see, I know that. That's why you have to come to SKB. But here, I can show you. See how I pulled these 2 apart here? It gives it width, okay? And I'll probably turn this horse's head a little too. You have to decide, do you want your piece to be static or do you want it to be dynamic? Okay, each one tells a different story. And just like a painting, you have to tell a story. You have to do something that invites people to look at it again, not just pass by it, and maybe even touch it. So let's see, we're just going to put this in here like so. And doing it this way too, you can still see your reference points in the actual armature. You're not covering them up. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to take your whole afternoon, and I will not finish this today. But I just want you to see what's involved with the beginning part. So maybe it doesn't seem so intimidating or so mysterious. It's not mysterious at all. I'm going to go get some more foil.
Literally, the drive from her house to the city is a mountain road of 20 minutes of washboard driving up and down. So she has to stock up on everything.
Yes, Anthony's been here several times. Costco, yay, they sell you big bowls. So again, making a rope. It gives you a lot more control instead of just wadding it up in a ball. And the other nice thing is about foil, even though you make it pretty compact, if you find that it's just gotten a little too big, you can always push it back into the clay so you can't see it. Now, a piece like this really doesn't need a lot of foil. I'm just showing you a little bit of that process. And it would be nice to get this to, you know how tape, you just can't find the end after a while? Well, I'm there. And you guys, if anybody wants to interject, I'm done talking your arms and your legs off. If you have questions as we go, feel free. The other nice thing about electrical tape is it's stretchy, so you can get a good tight fit to it. So I usually stretch it as I put it on. And I think this should be the last one right here.
I was kind of thinking the tape was a different, when you do it, when they go to mold it, it decomposes better.
No, actually, I recycle most all of my clay. So, you know, it's about conserving costs. And there's no reason you have to throw the clay away when you're done. You get your original piece back, a little beat up, after the mold is done. And I just cut it off the armature and use it for another piece. Like this particular piece right here used to be a polar bear. So let's see here. I'm going to start laying this in. And I'm going to leave my armature exposed for right now so that I am sure that I get things exactly. These are kind of a blueprint. They act like a blueprint. So I can get them exactly like I intended. Are these my photographs? No. I got these from the web. It is not a copyright infringement. There are some people in the art world who would say, mostly they're painters, who would say, oh, that's a copyright infringement. No, it's not. I'm doing a completely different composition. These are just references of a horse in this position. And let's face it, not everybody has the opportunity to photograph a horse in this position. So why not use the web? Okay, now there's a quick double check here. I can see how, it just saves time. I can see, even though it doesn't look like it needs to be higher there, it does need to be higher. And nothing's permanent at this point. You can always change things, reposition them, take off the clay. And that's there. All right. Has anybody watching ever had to paint in front of an audience? Anybody? I bet you have, Sherry. I don't know if she can hear.
She nodded.
Okay. It's a whole different experience. I remember the first time I did it, the first time I did anything in public, it was painting. And at first I was just like terrified. And then after a while, you just get into whatever it is you're doing. And it's not bad at all. All right, so I can still see this. I've double checked. Let me just check something right here. Here to here. A little bit more. Interesting. And I know that the end of the wire is here, and I'm going to leave it kind of the same. I'm just going to leave those things there. Basic shapes. I'm treating this like I would a drawing that I just started. Although I know not everybody draws that way. Like Dave Rankin, I know, just starts with one part of something he's drawing, and it just sort of mushrooms out from there. And that's a great drawing technique. But when I was taught to draw, I was taught to just use basic shapes and then let it develop from there, and you put in the details later. And that's pretty much the way I'm approaching sculpture too. It's really the better way to do it for sculpture. But his drawing technique is pretty awesome. I have started using that for some things, not for sculpture though. I think that needs to be thicker, but let me just double check that. Even when I did the big monuments, I had, there's a company called PostNet, if anybody has any close to them. Well, they'll take a drawing and make it as big as you like. Architects use it. And it's just so nice to be able to go to something like this and go, oh yeah, this is exactly where I need to be. So I'm starting to get a little bit of a feel of a horse here. And once this whole thing is put together, I'll probably do things to make it even more interesting. I've always found that it's better to exaggerate some poses and exaggerate muscles to give it more life. Now that's kind of thick there. I want to be sure to show the elbow here. Comparative anatomy is a very interesting thing, at least to me. So many animals share the same anatomy that we do. It's just that theirs is in different sizes. And I'm going to do something at this point. Needle nose pliers is a must, not only for the armature when you first make it, but I feel like this needs to be pulled out here. Hang on here. Yeah, there we go. Absolutely. All right, so now we're going to measure from here to here, there to there. Okay, good. Not much clay needed there. I see students start going in for the details way too soon. Like they'll start working on, you know, the ears and stuff like that. It's a big no-no. Just consider this a clay sketch for now. The other big difference I've noticed with painting and versus sculpture is I can be pretty tired and work on a sculpture and it just kind of relaxes me and things still are coming together. On a painting, if I'm tired, I'm done. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. All right, so now I'm just going to double check some things. Want to make sure this is where it needs to be. It's a little heavy, so let's take that down a little. At this point, with the clay being soft like this, you don't even need the tools. There we go. There's that. That looks good. All right. So now we need to look at the width. This is too narrow here even now. Horses have more bulk here. So we're going to pull that apart. But we have our foundation that we can work from. And I would just put this up here to indicate where the muscles are going to be. And bring this elbow out a little bit more. Now you don't want to leave holes on the inside. The clay has to be pretty compact in there, or else as you're working on it and using tools later, or even just your hands, if you have a hole in there, it's going to indent and it's going to mess everything up. So we can fill this in a little bit now. Some people prefer a softer clay. If you have arthritis in your hands, you may elect to do that. And that's fine. I am extremely lucky. I'm not afflicted with that. Although in the medical world, we have a saying, motion is lotion. Lotion to your joints. So pressing on warm clay might actually be beneficial for you if you do have arthritis. Let's see, notice I'm filling in all of these holes. You can see how helpful it is to have a turntable like this. If you don't have one, you can use something else. I'm going to show you. You can buy these at sculpture places. It's just like a little turntable. And I advise my students to get this. So you can put it on just a still table. I think you can buy these at kitchen supply places too. I don't know. But I got mine at Sculpture Depot. So at this point, I would start to bulk things out. Again, I just want to give you a rough idea of the process. I did not intend to finish this. That's why whenever you see me do anything for the quick draw, I have the piece about 85% done, because there's no way. I mean, I work in a very detailed way, and there's no way I would have enough time to finish it, but at least I can show you the start and the idea. And if you want to see more, sign up for SKB and we'll have fun. There's the most interesting conversations that occur while people are creating art together. And of course, we always end up learning from each other. Now, here again. And at SKB, I'm going to show relief, the creation of a relief, as well as 3D. There's a saying in the sculpture world that you just you never apply clay randomly. Every piece of clay that you apply has a purpose. That's another thing I see beginners do is they'll just take a walled up ball of clay and put it on there and think that they can do something with it later. It's better to put it on in the shape you want it right from the beginning. So what I'm doing here is I'm working in hip bones. These little guys right here. And let's see what else I can do. Once I get in the basic shapes, then I'll go back in and start refining muscles. And I have lots of references to refresh my memory on just how those muscles will look when a horse is in this position. Plus I have this one right here. I also work a lot from the computer where I'll take this very same photograph and I'll put it through Photoshop and punch up the highlights or make the shadows deeper so I can get a better idea on what the muscles are doing. It's amazing how computers have crept into our lives and just about everything, but can't do anything without them anymore. All right, it's very important to indicate a rib cage. You can see down here where it ends, and that whole area there is going to be bulked out because it's all ribs. And I am looking from the top here. Horses are, you can't really see it too well, but horses tend to be narrower in the shoulders and wider in the hips. If you paint or sculpt a creature often enough, you start to know those things automatically. And I'm not redoing any of the shapes I put in. I'm just adding to them so I don't lose my original form. Okay, so I do the same thing for the other side. And you can see what this looks like. Pretty horrible, but it doesn't matter. We're setting a foundation right now, okay? And as long as I pay attention to this view and to this and get it to sync with that, I have a great start. And then, like I said, once all this stuff is bulked out, then I can start going in and putting in the details. So I think I'm going to call it quits for now. If you want to see more, come to SKB. And
Cool, Chris, I enjoyed that.
well, good, good. And any questions? Contact me either through email on my website. And I don't want anyone to feel lost. I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed. It shouldn't be that way. This is all pure fun. And it's fun that can make you money. Isn't that cool?
This is true. Anybody else that wants to say anything, you remember you're muted. If you want to talk, hold your space bar down to say anything.
Thank you, Christine. It was wonderful.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I look forward to seeing any one of you that are able to make it either in Zoom or live.
All right.
Thank you, Chris. It was wonderful.
Good.
Great demonstration. Thank you.